either they've fled away, they've left the scene, but in that occasion, they were still there. And the information was not clear. So I found myself right in the scene. On one hand, there is a lot of risk, there's a lot of danger, but on the other hand, there are people who are lying down and need our help and they are crying. So I can say on that day, I was not myself. I was somebody else. But apart from the Westgate also, there is a time that we had a fire incident in Sinai. And that was my first time to go to a rescue mission. And I could see a lot of bodies scattered, and there were a lot of emotions to do with myself. So I had to retreat because I couldn't cope with it, and let my colleagues proceed.
Handle it.
Yeah,
also, it can get to that point where even you as a rescuer, you can't take it anymore.
Yes. Sometimes you may be able to know that this is too much for me, but sometimes you may just take courage because you're also motivated with the fact that you want to save life. You don't want a life to get lost, because it will be more worse if a life is not saved and you are able to save that life. So that's why we get motivated. But even as responders, when we go through such situations, we have our own mechanisms of dealing with such kind of...
So you also suffer inside. There is an impact also, in as much as you're not part of the incident directly, you're also affected in a way.
Yes.
Yeah. And Grace, you've also been in this country, and you've seen, very unfortunate scenarios happening in our news and all that. What do you really remember? What was the worst moment for you?
I really, let me see. I want to say that the last traumatic experience I had really was being in Katrina in the US, because I was there. That's what I can relate to, because I was there. It was where I lived, and even having to sit and watch, as people are being rescued, as water is carrying.
So the hurricane happened just nearby?
I mean, in the city where I live.
Okay.
It's just that I had left. When they said evacuate, I evacuated. But I evacuated, and I got to my safety the morning before it, or the morning after it hit. And so you can imagine me waking up to news and seeing these are places that I know, and these are people that probably live in my neighborhood, and they are having to deal with that. But then the traumatic experience for me was going back to my house and seeing the way it was, and smelling, because of course it flooded and everything was all over the place, and then there was that smell of rottenness. I will never forget, because I couldn't handle it. I had to leave. And so for me, that was one of the traumatic experiences that I've had. And I want to say also that there is also what I deal with now in counseling more than anything is actually trauma from domestic violence, continued domestic violence, and then trauma from sexual violence. And so years and years have passed, and this person now is trying to make sense of what happened then. And that is what now the aftermath of the psychological aftermath of the tragedy is what now comes to us in counseling. And it's very difficult when we do debriefing after or immediately after the disaster, and that is good. However, the symptoms and the struggle now of the stress, the traumatic stress, comes a month after that.
By debriefing, you mean what you as professionals have to go through to also get that information and experience and emotion out of your system?
Yeah, well, debriefing, we go and debrief.
Okay.
So there is a disaster that has happened. Counselors will be on site to be able to allow the people to talk through, to hold them, to let them cry, to encourage them to, to feel what they are feeling. However, after some time, there needs to be also some debriefing. You see, the problem is we go to the disaster site, and when we do it, then we go home and we leave them. But even us as counselors, like my brother was saying, we also need debriefing. It's very, very important.
Because you also also get impacted.
Oh, yes.
And once also there was, I attended a conference of journalists, and the key issue that came out was the fact that even journalists
Yes.
who
Yes.
cover such tragic,
Oh, yes.
incidences need some sort of counseling.
Oh,
the
yes.
photographers, you can
Yes.
imagine they get the raw footage,
Yes.
and they shoot that video raw as it is before the
Exactly.
viewers get the edited version.
Yeah.
So you can imagine what goes into their minds when they are
Exactly.
sleeping at night, and what they're thinking about with the horrific,
Yeah.
scenes that they captured during the day. So I agree with you on that. But let's talk about, today it's all about safety, and we go back to prevention. Signs that can tell me that something is off, something is about to happen. I'll come to the psychological part of it, but let's look at the physical. Just
Yes.
the normal things that somebody will need to look out for when you're somewhere,
Yeah.
just to make sure that you're safe, you're okay. What are the basic rules that we
The-
need to start?
The basic is to start by inculcating a culture of safety first, so that whenever you are somewhere, the first thing you need to note is that is this area safe for me? And then probably if you note some dangers that are around, you can either remove them. But if you cannot remove those dangers, it's safer for you to avoid being in that area. Then there are some of the risky behaviors that we have lived with as a society. So if you take, for instance, a case of driving on the road, there are some risky behaviors that people have lived with that they have to quit them for them to remain safe, things like overspeeding. But then when you go to places like at home, you find that once somebody has a mentality and he has inculcated a culture of safety first, he will always ensure that even in the kitchen, everything is well arranged, and he's prepared with things like first aid kit, fire extinguishers, just in case something goes wrong.
Do we have those in our homes?
Very rare.
Question to ponder.
Very rare.
Do we have them?
No. Most people don't have such kind of things, but they are affordable and very life-saving. You take, for instance, a first aid kit that costs about 2,000 and can help you avoid getting a lot of medical bills, because you can handle some situations at home by yourself, and some of the situations you can prevent from worsening. But you see, until you inculcate that culture of safety first, is when you will be able to appreciate that you need this kind of items. Otherwise, other people do it for regulatory reasons. There must be a law requiring you to do A, B, C, D, which should not be the case.
You should think about
You
yourself.
you should think
Drive
about,
safely because
yes,
you love yourself enough
Yes.
to do it.
Yes.
Not because the law requires you
Yeah,
to do
sure.
that. But let's talk about safety in public spaces, because at home I can control my own safety. There are spaces where I'm in charge of my own safety. I can do something about it. But what about in public spaces, the malls, and marketplace, where there are so many people and very little to be in control over? How do you ensure that even in that space you are safe, you're okay?
Yeah, in public spaces, there are always, when you get to a public place, you have to take a mental picture of the place. For instance, you can be in a stadium. You have to take a mental picture and assume which kind of hazards that may exist. So if you take a public space, maybe there could be a stampede. If something comes up and people start running, there can be a stampede. So you need to know, if there is a stampede, where will I exit from? You find some people get into a building and they don't know where they will exit when danger
Something
comes.
happens.
Yes. And then there are some situations that when you are in public places, you need to know where are the utilities. For instance, you might get an infection. Maybe you eat something that gets worse on your body. You need to know, where will I get access to the support services? Do they have, for instance, an instant first aid post on site, or any other utility? You see, one big important thing in ensuring safety is water. It is used in many instances of first aid. So you need to know, for instance, where there are those kinds of water points, where, for instance, if maybe you get into a situation that starts bleeding, you have
What do
stopped
you
the
do?
bleeding, where do you go and clean up the mess, things like that. But the primary responsibility to secure a public area remains with the owner of the property. Is the one who has the primary responsibility. But you have a secondary onus to ensure that you also protect yourself from any kind of danger. There are some situations where you get into a place and your instinct tells you this place is not safe for me.
And that is where I
You
wanted
just
Grace to
exit.
come in.
Yeah.
The Africans, and you always have that gut feeling. You know, that I wanted to go today, but I felt let me stay at home, and then I had something happen. I don't know if it is true, but you know, just looking at your mind and what you feel inside you, what are some of the things that you can also do just to listen to the inner voice and be able to identify? Even I hear that you can read a mind of somebody and know that this is not a very good person. Is it possible? Can it help? You know, the mind?
Yes,
Can
yes.
it help you be safe?
One of the issues that that is important for us to do is what we keep saying. You hear people say this a lot. Be aware of yourself. A lot of times we have too much going on, too much stress, too much worries. We are anxious about a lot of things. We are not aware of what is going on right here. And so for me to be able to listen to that inner voice that tells me danger, here there is danger, stay away from it, I would need to be mindful. And mindfulness is the art of being in the moment. Now, if we have a lot of stress, psychological stress, you know, there is a difference between, for me, there is a difference between psychological stress and just stress sijalipa maji. That is a normal stress. However, if that stress turns into I haven't paid for my water because I am this kind of a person, or because everything I try doesn't work. So if I have that, yes, I am a failure, I'm not good enough, everybody is against me. If I don't have good mental health, then I'm not going to be aware of my surroundings, because my mind cannot stay here. I'm either dealing with the regrets of the past or the pains of the past, or I'm dealing with the fears of the future. And so I'm not able to stay in the moment. And that is going to keep us away from being able to hear that inner voice that tells us. The other thing is we tend to hear it and we ignore it. The thing is that when we have lived in spaces like he is talking about, we are used to being in unsafe situations, then we are not able to see when it is unsafe, because this unsafeness
has become normal.
Yeah, and that is what we have talked about, homes where there is no psychological safety. We have talked about here. And kids grow up thinking it's normal for daddy to hit around or mommy to call daddy names. And so we are not able to
Inculcate
the culture of safety first.
The culture of safety, my own psychological and mental safety, so that I can be able to have my antennas. And I'm glad that you have said we need, when you go into a situation, we need to pay attention to what is going on around us, so that you can catch things that would be dangerous to you, and you can either remove yourself from the situation but how many of us have the courage
I don't
to do
even
that?
think we even think about all these issues you guys are telling us. We just go, like if I go somewhere, I just want to get the service or the product I want and get out, or just spend my time there and get out. I never get to really think about how safe I am, and many people are like that. You just assume that everything is okay, everything is normal, and we live like that.
It's very true. It's very true, because you look at the way people look at things, especially in the Kenyan context. People look at higher level responsibility. They look at, for instance, what the administration in the area is not doing, what maybe the county government in charge of that area is not doing, what authorities are not doing. But these people are at least struggling to do something. And you always hear it, that safety begins with you. But
Usalama unaanza na wewe.
Yes.
Yes.
It means even if, for instance, you are in an unsafe situation, even if you call for support, there is that time gap that you need to do something to help yourself before that help itself arrives. So this is the thing which, if people break it and know that everything starts with them, then even the higher levels will have very little to do, because most situations when dealt with at local level, there will be very little to handle at very high levels.
Okay. There are others that I've had over time, like if you get somewhere, get to know people around you, say hi, you know, get to know their names. You never know. I mean, just say hi and get to know their names. Talk a little, get to understand each other. Don't just go somewhere and sit. that person sitting next to you can be
Could
a very
be.
big risk
Yes.
of your own security. So say hi, even in a matatu, even in church, in public places. Just get to say hi to that person you're going to be spending most time with in that particular place for that particular time. Get there early so that you get to even find out the utilities where they are, the ones that Fred was talking about. Go early and get to study the environment and look at how safe you are in that particular environment.
Right.
But then, assuming something has happened, like let's use the Westgate attack as an example.
Yeah.
And people get so confused and make so many mistakes in the attempt to, be safe.
Yeah, sure.
Something that makes even the situation more worse.
Yes.
Talk to us about it. What are some of the mistakes that people make in such an unfortunate scenario? Something has just happened from nowhere.
The biggest tragedy usually is not the tragedy itself. It's the tragedy that somebody did not have a plan of action before that thing happened. So he will just respond haphazardly without really knowing what is the next result of the action he's doing. So you will find, for instance, somebody is running towards the danger instead of running away from the danger because he had not thought of such kind of a thing occurring. But usually you find that when something happens, it's good to just make a short, quick assessment of what is happening. For instance, you hear gunshots. Maybe the side where you're hearing the sound is not the source of the sound, and you may be running and exposing yourself to
danger.
the danger, just like it was happening at Westgate. So once you know that, you know how to evacuate to safety. Then once you evacuate to safety, you need to always have at your fingertips or maybe on your mobile phone the safety numbers which you can call. It can be for police, for ambulance, for fire departments. So once you are in safety, you can call so that other people who may not have evacuated to safety
Can get help.
But most important is to always go for attend these short courses for safety, like first aid, so that you can learn some of the basics, because they are not brain science.
But people say
They're
I'm not a
just-
doctor, so why did I go learn?
You see, these are skills which even if somebody didn't step in class 1, for instance,
You
first
need
aid,
them.
Yeah.
they can easily learn, and the result of it is that you can never learn first aid and fail to save somebody's life at some particular point. And once you start doing this, you become very helpful even within the community where you stay. So even if you are at home, or you are with the family, or you are in church, or you are in any kind of gathering, other people will also feel safe because of your presence. They know that in case things
Something
go
happens,
wrong, there is
you're
at least
there.
somebody who can sort out
And
things.
it's good that you will show us a little something.
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, in terms of first aid.
Yes.
Even as we get motivated
Yeah, sure.
to go learn more. But Grace, he has talked about people making even more mistakes, running towards the danger instead of away. But you know, in that moment, we face a lot of things running in our minds.
Yeah.
How do you compose yourself to now think about, okay, wait, I'm not supposed to run in that direction, let me go in this direction? You
Right.
can't really. You're scared, you're confused, there's just an array of activities, people just running helter-skelter.
Right.
How do you compose yourself? How do you work with your mind to
Yeah.
really know what to do?
I think you've said it right. It's really, I mean, at that point, your adrenaline level is so high. And at that point, you're just thinking, I just need to get out of here. Whichever, I just need to move. I need to do
something.
moving. Your mind is saying, go, 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 go. And so it is very difficult for, at that moment, to be able to have a plan, to come up with a plan. So the best thing is what Fred has said, that that have some sort of plan of how I'm going to deal with if we have a disaster happening. And of course, it is very difficult to even come up with that. But the important thing is that if we inculcate the culture of personal safety, and even when, as we are talking here about Westgate, I'm thinking I take my kids to TRM all the time. But you ask me if I have ever looked at the evacuation
the exit.
Yeah, because they always have those in the buildings,
and
right?
they're
But
clearly
how many
indicated.
of us look, because we don't we are not aware, or we haven't allowed ourselves to be to look at what happened at Westgate and actually think that it could happen elsewhere, and I need to always be alert. And so in the moment, it's very difficult to do that. However, if you have trained your mind to think about safety issues, then you will remember that I went to that training, or I have read this document. Usually they say, if there is any danger, that you run this way, you look for the next possible exit to go. That and so, but if you don't have that information in your mind,
what do you
at
do?
that point you are just going to go with what comes into your mind at that point. So I would say that preparation, prevention, like you said, preparation for something like that ever happening is very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
One very important reminder, something Fred said that we should all embrace: have emergency numbers.
Yes.
Just have them on
Yes.
your phone. You never know when you'll need them. Even just have that person that you can always count on in case you're somewhere and you're caught up in something. Have at least numbers that are important that can help you come out of that situation. Because after you've run away, or you're hidden somewhere, what next? You'll have to communicate to the world.
And I want to add something. We have this culture of Kenyans these days that we say, even if I call the police, they won't do anything. And that causes us not to have
Or
the
they will
numbers.
not come here.
Because in my mind, they are not going to help me.
Yes.
But I want to say, always do due diligence to anything. We have gone to schools and we have trained kids for self-defense, that you can scream, that you can run, that you can hit, you can kick. But if we don't have that information, when we are faced with danger, our brain has no information on how we should react. So we react that emotional, or we coil in, and we are not able to protect ourselves. But there is a lot that we can do if we take time to feed our minds with those safety
All right.
things.
Fred, for over 80 years,
Yes.
the organization has been going to such
Yeah, sure.
scenarios.
Yes.
And what exactly do you do? The first thing you get there, what is this? What is the steps that you take the victims through? What happens exactly? What is your game plan?
Usually the first step starts when you call us. When you call us, we do not wait to come. We first of all tell you what you need to do as we are on the way. But once we arrive at the scene, what we do is we do what is called a scene size up. We just size up the scene to see whether the resources we have come with are able to handle the situation. If they are not, then the person on the scene will call for backup. But if they are adequate, he will proceed and start giving treatment. And during that time, we normally use a system called triage, where you classify casualties depending on severity of their injuries. So the most serious ones we handle first, and mostly they are the ones who have airway problems. Because you see, when your airway is blocked, you cannot get in oxygen. And if your brain cells, for instance, are denied oxygen for more than 4 minutes, brain cells are not replaceable. So death is likely soon after. So we have to go and open that airway. But it is something anybody can do. Yeah, because you just take your 2 fingers.
You have something you can show us?
Yeah, sure.
Feel free. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
so
I may not be able to be in a position where I can call, but I may save a life.
Yeah.
So this is somebody who has just been involved in a very tragic incident, and they can't breathe, and they're just lying there helpless.
Yeah.
So what do I do as Safin?
So the first thing that you'll do, of course, you'll assess the area around this person, because what caused the danger to this person may also harm you.
Okay.
So you assess. And if you can spot it, maybe he's connected to some live wires, you just remove. And if everything is safe, you proceed and give first aid. So the first thing is to handle the airway. We normally say A, B, C. You handle airway, then breathing, then circulation of blood.
Okay.
Yeah, so airway, first you just tilt the head, hold here, use the 2 fingers and tilt like this.
Okay.
When you do like this, the airway is fully open and air will easily move.
Okay.
Then once you do this, you can assess, for instance, the breathing, which you can feel. You just put your ear, you can feel the warmth, but you can also hear the sound. At the same time, you can see the chest rise and fall. If that does not happen, then you know that casualty is in danger, and you need to do something called cardiopulmonary resuscitation, basically trying to revive the heart because the heart has stopped breathing. What is popularly known as giving 2 rescue breaths and 30 chest compression. So you will come to the mouth area.
This is the kiss of life?
Yes, yes, yes.
People call it the kiss of life.
Yes, so when you blow on the mouth, through the mouth,
Okay. Oh,
you see it is rising.
Oh, so we assume this is the lung.
The lung is somewhere here.
Do it again.
So when you blow,
Oh,
it comes up.
Okay.
So you
I was
blow.
about to ask what is the importance of this polythene bag we have here, but now I know.
Yes.
Yeah, it's supposed to serve as the lungs. Okay.
Yeah. So once you blow here, but sometimes it can give you infection. So you need to use some face mask. But if you don't have the face mask, you can modify a polythene to avoid cross-infection between the casualty and yourself.
Okay.
Then sometimes if you cannot manage and you really fear, you just continue to do chest compressions. So after giving 2 rescue breaths, that is 1, 2, you put the palm of your hand at the center of the chest and then you hold it back with the other hand. Then you press 30 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30.
So how is the pressure like, the force? So
the force is just an adequate force to make the chest go down, not too much, not too little, because there's very little that you can use to measure. You just ensure that you press adequately down and up. So when you are doing this, basically what you are trying to do is you pumping oxygen to the blood, I mean to the lungs, and then because the work of your heart is to pump blood. So when you do like this, you are pumping the blood so that the blood can go to vital organs like the brain and other body tissues.
Wow. So you start by at least angling the head, you tilt it a bit.
Yes.
Do you use some sort of supportive material? Because maybe this person is passed out, like they are not there. They can't really, like for instance, hold their head like this naturally because they're not there.
Yeah.
So do you use something to support the
Not really.
head to be this way?
No, you just hold it like that. But if you have somebody else, maybe he's a bystander, he doesn't know first aid, you can tell him to help you in holding the head into position. But if you are alone, you have to maneuver, maybe one hand holding.
But these things you have to do very fast because you're trying to save a life
very fast
here.
because in a situation where somebody is not breathing, you only have about 4 minutes to act.
Just 4 minutes.
Yes,
wow.
That's why in situations like choking, you find most babies nowadays die at home because it happens so fast that even when you call for an ambulance, it may not arrive in 4 minutes.
And we have a baby.
Yes.
We have a baby in studio.
Yeah, so...
So I was feeding this baby,
yeah.
and then something just happened. They can't breathe, they're just there. What do I do? Let me bring our casualty. Assuming now he's breathing.
Yeah, so the first thing that you do, for instance, if you have the baby here, is to check the mouth. If there is any object that you can see, you use the small finger to remove it. But if you cannot see, you don't do a blind sweep. Yeah? You use the small finger because the baby's mouth is small, and you can't use the other big fingers. If you can't see the object, you turn the baby facing down, and then you protect the neck area. You hold the baby down, and then you can support your hand on your lap. Then you give 5 back blows. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This will put pressure on the body cavity to push the object that is choking the baby out. Then you turn the baby. Again, you do the same process. Check if you can see something. Use the small finger to
get it
remove
out.
it. But then now the second maneuver is to put the baby facing up. Then you use the 2 fingers, press the chest area 5 times.
Like sort of what you are doing, but now with just 2 fingers and...
Yes, just 2 fingers. Because this chest area is small,
so
you
small.
can't use it. So you press 5 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you alternate like that 3 times. That is 5 back blows, and then 5 chest compressions 3 times. If the baby is still choking, you need to start making arrangements of taking the baby to hospital as you continue with the maneuvers, because you know breathing is very important for any kind of human
There's
survival.
a special request that, you know, we'd like to see exactly, like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how
Just
to
position the yes, yeah.
Okay.
No, the way you had, yes,
Like this?
that way, yes, so that you do it again, so that they can be able to get a better view.
Probably I can bend a little because the baby need to be like this.
Okay.
Is it clear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you do is you press at the center of the chest.
Okay.
5 times. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and then you alternate with 5 back blows. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Just minimal pressure.
Yes,
Just don't
but
be
you
too
see,
much.
you should not be afraid that maybe injury is
break the
going to
baby,
occur,
yeah.
because it's better injury than death.
Than death. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So you better save the life first. Those kind of other injuries, you can deal with them
But later.
And you know,
Okay.
the baby's organ is the baby's structure is mainly composed of cartilage. It's really not the hard bones. That's why in accidents, you'll see many babies survive than adults.
Than adults.
Yeah,
Okay.
because their body structure is mainly composed of cartilage that is
Okay.
very flexible.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in case of accidents, what do you do exactly if somebody has just collapsed? Is it
Ye-
the same procedure that you did on
Yes,
casualty?
in accident, the procedure is slightly different, but more of the same.
Okay.
Once you get into an accident, one thing you must imagine is that another vehicle can come and also run over you. So you need to put alerts at a safe distance. That's why people put that triangle,
The triangle, yeah.
warning triangle.
To
And
stop
if you don't
or-
have, maybe you modify the leaves, but at
Or
least
stones or just something?
yeah, just something to notify other oncoming motorists that there is
Something is
something in
happening.
front. Then after doing that, you have made the area safe. Then you proceed and do the rescue or the first aid to the people. And when you are doing first aid, you again prioritize in what I was talking of about triage. You start with the people who have airway problems. Normally you will find them lying flat, not talking, not doing anything.
It's like they're not there.
Those people have a very short time to live, so you have to start with them. And then you go to check breathing and assist those who have breathing problems. But in most occasions, you will find there are people who are bleeding, but they are not the people to start with.
Okay.
But in
Blood
most-
shouldn't scare you much.
It shouldn't scare you because they have more time to live than those who have airway problems. So
Okay.
once you finish with the airway issues, you go to people who have who are bleeding. And to treat bleeding, it's very simple. You just tell the person who is bleeding to press the area which is bleeding. That will stop the bleeding from continuing. Because sometimes you may not be having gloves, but if you have gloves, you can do the compressions yourself. But if you don't have, you tell the casualty to press by themselves. And then after that, after the bleeding has stopped, you can look for a clean cloth or a bandage. Then you tie the area to prevent
wrap it.
infections.
So that has to be done after the bleeding has stopped.
Yes.
Many people just do it because
Ye-
we feel the bandage will help the bleeding to stop.
Yes,
No, that's
yes,
what we think.
Yes, it's very
does,
true.
yeah?
Yes, it does. It does. But you see, initially, when you're looking for the bandage or you are removing
You
it
have to do
forever,
something in
you
the
have
process,
to
'cause
keep
too much bleeding is also
compressing
bad.
that area. And if it's, for instance, an area on your hand, you can raise it above the heart level, so blood will not go there by nature of gravity. So there will be very minimal flow of blood to the area of the injury.
Okay.
So you raise it. And that's why when you are injured on the arm, normally you see the doctor giving you a sling to put like that so that you can raise it above the heart level. And you know, when you do like that, you not only prevent bleeding, but you also reduce the pain.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, nice. Very nice tips. That
Yes.
very simple ones.
Yes.
How, you can imagine if we all knew how to do that, how many people could be saved?
Yeah.
Because I believe many people lose their lives at the scene of the accident
Yes.
because they can't breathe and nobody knows how to. you
Yes,
know,
I've seen
conduct
even
the simple,
instances of breathing where you find somebody is being called to be given help. Then he says, no, I'm okay. Then you see after some time they collapse
Okay.
on their way. It means they have either an internal bleeding or an external bleeding, which they pay little attention
to.
And you know, when your body loses blood, you will get into something called shock. You have shortage of supply of oxygenated blood, which is very required by, for instance, the brain for you to function well.
Grace, that you know, moment, in as much as your life is trying to be saved and all that, there's a lot of emotional torment that comes with that. People get confused. They can't even give information about themselves and their families. And there's usually that session in the process of rescuing the victims. There's a section for the psychological and counseling aspect. Take us through how also why this is important, how it should be done, and you know, how is it helping this victim really come out of that particular experience?
Well, one of the things is that, of course, your brain is in shock. And so the talk with the therapist at that point, it will help to stimulate the brain to continue to give information, and just the being there with that person, and sometimes we have hysterical people who completely go into kind of hysteria because they are too much in shock. But also we don't want people to just go mute. So we want to be able to offer the support for them to either keep talking about what is going on, because also we are aware, like he said, they may look okay, but we may not know what is going on psychologically. So if I am there and I am trying to talk to this person and they are not able to comprehend, then I can be able to, you know, to get help with someone who can be able to make sure that they are okay, that there is something that needs to be done. Because again, with us counselors, we are dealing with the psychological and the emotional. However, the doctors who are on site, they can deal with the medical part of it. So I can be able to say, hey, this person, they don't look okay. They are not even knowing where they are. They are disoriented. What should we do about
Why
that?
do others carry this years? Years later, you still go to a mall and you're like, I'm so scared, something can happen. Why does it happen? And how do you get out of that fear so that you can move on with your life?
Yeah, there is something that we call post-traumatic stress disorder or syndrome that is actually, the symptoms are having flashbacks because you went through or you witnessed a very severely dangerous situation where you felt your life was in danger, or you feared for your life. You felt the feeling of death. And so what happens is that your brain goes into certain, I'm not a brain, analyst, but what I know what I know from dealing with PTSD is that your brain locks that information because it's too much for you to deal with, and that is what we call trauma. So it kind of locks it like that. So what happens over time if you don't deal with this, if you don't have counseling? That's why we say that people who have gone through traumatic experiences, they do need the debriefing at the moment, but they do need follow-up a month after, because PTSD begins to form after a month. Look at people who lose loved ones, a wife who loses a husband who was everything in the home. Then you see that during the burial she's strong, she's talking, she's able, because she has something, she's in numbness, but she has something to do, so she's focused and she's able to do that. A month after the death of the child or the husband, that's when she falls apart. And that's when we see them now coming into counseling, because it begins the emotions now. Because the brain has a way of protecting us. And so when it locks that information, then when the danger is no longer there, there is a way that you begin, it's almost like you're beginning to release this information. And every time that information comes, you lock it again, because it's the flashback. It feels like you are going back to what it was. The intrusive thoughts that you have all the time, you go into, you develop anxiety. It's an anxiety, an anticipation of something that happened in the past is going to happen again. I won't be able to handle it, and I panic. And so people develop panic attacks. People develop an insomnia, inability to sleep. There are people who have constant nightmares, so they are afraid of falling asleep. Kukianza tu kukua na giza, when it begins to get dark, they get scared, the anxiety begins to rise, they are not able to settle down so that they can sleep. And then nightmares a lot of people talk about feeling like they are being chased by someone. It's very fearful. They wake up, they are screaming, they are sweating. We have had cases of where people I may be sitting here with you and suddenly I panic and I start to scream, I start to run because I just had a flashback.
Okay.
I have
so
been
such
reminded.
people, you really need to continue
Yes.
with the counseling sessions
Yes.
until you're okay,
Yes.
until you feel...
You talk because the brain has locked this information.
Okay.
When counseling happens, we begin to tell
it
the
out.
story
Okay.
and we open it up like this, we process it.
Okay.
When we process it, it goes into memory lane.
All
It's
right.
no longer, it doesn't have as much, but as long as it's not processed, it stays as if
Okay.
it's happening.
All
That's
right.
what we call flashbacks.
All right,
Yes.
Grace. Fred, as we are about to wrap up, what are you guys doing to pass this information to people? Because people do not even know how to handle, for example, an accident scene.
Yeah.
You'd carry the bus with people inside. People just make a lot of mistakes. What is it that you're doing exactly to pass this information? You conduct trainings?
Yeah, normally what we do is we do a lot of training. We start with training small children from as young as 6 years in schools and to secondary schools. And also we have training for adults at our various training centers. We train companies, we train these matatu drivers, because our long-term mission as an organization is to ensure that every household has at least a trained first aider who is able to share the knowledge. And this is what we try to achieve each and every time. So we encourage people to join some of these classes and learn. And when it comes to things like ladies who have babies, we encourage them to even bring their nannies so that they can be able to take care of the children at home. So because sometimes you may be trained yourself, but you are not at the point in which you can be able to help. So you bring the person who is closer to the risk to come and get trained. And you see, these trainings don't take long. They take, for instance, about 1 to 5 days, depending on the number of days that you have.
Right.
And we even organize for weekend. So really people do not have any excuse
Not to know something
not
about
to know
fasting.
something about fasting.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your time. I wish we had more time. This is a very important conversation. But like they say, there's always another day for something like this, because these are the kind of things that we need to be talking about each and every day. Make it part of us. But one thing I've learned is that now I know the importance of the kiss of life. Well, it's done. And you begin just by tilting the head first, monitor the person. If nothing is happening, 2 blows.
Yeah.
Kiss that person twice.
Yeah.
Just not kiss, actually, blow into
Yes.
their
Yeah.
hands. And then you just kind of press their chest about 30 times.
You're a good student.
Yeah, I am. And after this, I'm going to try that and make it perfect. Because I know with that information, I can just save a life one day. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for watching. Today, it is also Health Tuesday. And Rama Goko is coming in a short while with on the other side of the break with another interview talking about matters stroke this morning, just creating awareness about stroke. And that is a conversation that you also need to be part of. Stay with us. My name is Safin Acheng Oma.